everyone. Greetings to those who are fairly new and brand new to our group. Very nice to have you here with us tonight. We're all together as soon as we come to the Zen Center. We are taking refuge in Buddha, the mind that is potentially awake in all of us, but also just the true, clear, open field of awareness that we all can come to appreciate and live from. So we take refuge in the Buddha, we take refuge in the Dharma, which is the company of everything, the infinite universe. And we take refuge in the Sangha of all living beings. We share this breath with 8 billion humans and infinite other than human at this moment, all over the world. And I dedicate this talk to all of the billions and billions and trillions of living beings who at this moment are struggling in this world. The Buddha taught that awakening to our Buddha nature, the nature of mind and heart, our essential natural mind, is the medicine that cures grief and lamentation. And at this moment in the world, can you hear me? It's pretty hard to imagine not feeling a great deal of grief and lamentation with what's going on in the world. So we have this capacity, but few of us have the conditions that we are all receiving at this moment for realizing our capacity, for our very wide open mind and heart, no matter what the circumstances. Even if we have the blessings of Dharma as individuals, we're also living in a world that hasn't developed this collectively, this awareness collectively. And we're also all subject to each other's karmic energies. So it would be impossible to be free of grief at a time like this in the world. So this is from the Pali Canon. Touched by painful feeling, he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. It invades his mind and remains because his mind is not developed. Undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind. So this is the Buddha's description of those who have not realized the true conditions of life, the true nature of all conditions, the nature of ourself and all things. So with the blessing of Dharma practice, we're much more awake to what we contribute to the collective mind. Hopefully, slowly but surely we get there. This one heart and mind of the world. When the mind is still undeveloped, but we practice meditation, we're purifying the mind. This is natural. The Satipatthana Sutra says the purification of the mind, the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, the disappearance of dukkha and discontent, the entering of the right way, and the realization of nibbana. This is the promise, right, of this practice. So what do these words mean? We're always working with the language and the translation through many different languages that the teachings come to us. And the only way that they are liberating, that they're at all helpful, is if we recognize, we understand what they mean in our own experience. Otherwise, it's just more words in a world of billions of words. To realize the liberation from suffering, and the suffering, the word for suffering is dukkha. And dukkha is not only the suffering of sorrow and grief and impatience, but it's the suffering also of limited happiness that is based on getting, attaining. Because once we get, we hold, or we want to keep. And that's another form of suffering. So there's always some kind of agitation built into a mind that is not completely aware of this moment and open in this moment and deeply, essentially relaxed completely. So a term like purifying can be trouble. Purifying comes to us through a culture, the original culture that the Buddha is from was very hung up about purity. And there's a book by an anthropologist titled Purity and Danger. And so when we think of purity, I love that title because purity immediately brings the idea that there's impurity. And so we get caught in opposites. My mind is impure. My heart is impure. So not getting what it means in this context, the way that it was meant, the way that it is liberating, colors our understanding. If we don't get what purifying, what happens in this practice that is intrinsically purifying. And we may assume that purity is always in relation to impurity. But actually, in my experience, the meaning of purifying the mind is more like what happens naturally. When the mind settles, when the body and mind comes to know stillness, silence, and relaxation. Maybe some of you have experienced that if you've done any longer periods like retreats of meditation, that at a certain point, the state of concentration becomes refined and there's a relaxation that happens even when you don't even realize you weren't relaxed. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize I was not relaxed until I suddenly relaxed more than I've ever relaxed before. We don't talk a lot about, it's generally not talked about, the importance of relaxation. Because it's not that we relax and we kind of go limp and fall asleep and snore and bob on the cushion, which most of us have had the experience of doing. And then we start again, we start over. But relaxation is very profound because the kind of relaxation that comes with long practice, a deep vow, is a release from the kind of the grabbing hold of a self and coming into union with everything. And it's very simple, and it's very quiet, and very extensive. We all have this capacity, which is one reason to describe it, so that we don't go for years and years thinking that meditation is some special state. I mean, we do have bliss states. They happen, maybe. Not everybody has them. Sometimes they come, but that's not the point. The point is to know the true mind, the natural state of a relaxed, open, present mind. So when awareness is open and entirely relaxed, even though thoughts are drifting through, when we're deeply relaxed and still and open, then there's nothing clinging. There's nothing, there's no impediment, there's no hitch, there's no distraction. Even if they're, somebody's next door with a buzzsaw cutting down a large tree. It's not a distraction, it's part of the activity of the world. It's part of the activity of the large self of the world. So there's no one to be distracted. We are free from all sensations that we identify as me. Everybody here has experienced this, we just may not realize it. So we point it out. Usually we have experience like this when we're really absorbed in something we're really interested in. It's one reason why we love to have things that we're really interested in. Because we are free of a self that is clinging and congealed and holding. So realizing this for ourselves takes a vow to persist in practice, to persist in wholeheartedness and willingness to relax and stay aware no matter what. So there's a kind of willingness and wholeheartedness is called the wholehearted way, but in a culture that is so we're so expected to be skeptical and have opinions all the time. It's very hard to be wholehearted. So that's part of our practice, is what gets in the way of being wholehearted, no matter what we're doing. Well, we're at work, taking a walk, answering the phone, paying bills. What is it to be wholeheartedly paying the bills? It is not adding anything. It's just fully attending. The Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra says, far beyond all inverted views, with nothing to attain, the Bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita and the wisdom of just this, just as it is, perfect and complete as is. Thus the mind is without hindrances. The hindrances are sensual desire, meaning you're not caught in taste and touch and smell, and it is part of the universal moment. We're not caught in ill will. So we may have opinions, but we like things and we don't like things, but we're not caught by it. We're not caught up in sloth and torpor. I love that phrase, sloth and torpor. Does anybody here not know that condition for yourself? We're not caught up in restlessness and remorse. What is it to be not caught? It's to recognize it. Wow, I'm really restless. And sometimes in meditation, you can suddenly hit incredible restlessness. It's just part of it. Just like all of these states and skeptical doubt and fear, all of the endless forms of difficulties are part of our life as a human being. It's part of the human condition. But the freedom that we're looking at is, what does it mean not to be caught? It doesn't mean to live unaffected with nothing going on but bliss. That's a terrible misunderstanding. And it's a real state of holding on. If you're holding on to bliss states, good luck. That's not in Zen what we do, what we're interested in. So when the Buddha taught that with awakening comes the cessation of grief and lamentation, he was living in a world in India nearly 3,000 years ago. And it was marked by warfare and power struggles and hostilities, not only in the towns and kingdoms, but also in the Sangha. Which is one reason why it's really interesting to read the Pali Canon, if you can ever get around to it. It's quite extensive. But you recognize, oh yeah, humans have difficulties. It's the first noble truth, and it's definitely the truth in groups. So all of this leads to killing and further suffering for all those who are subject to the powers that be, which is all of us. And we're still doing this. In the Middle East right now, it's blowing up. Eastern Europe is blowing up. Central and South America, and in many places in Africa, there are wars unfolding, and that involve not only the major combatants, but millions and millions of civilians who just want to live peaceably where they are and are unable to. So we can all bring prayers for the Palestinians who are trying to clear out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip right at this moment, right now. Nowhere to flee, although the Egyptians have agreed to open a corridor. But with 1.1 million people streaming through that corridor, that's a profound suffering state. In the US, we are implicated in this. Of course, we're part of the great world, and we have a long-held tradition of putting arms into the war machines of many foreign powers, and heating up these hostilities which are ancient, deeply held, and are hard to interrupt, no matter how strong the weapons are. These are the ways of war, and our idea of progress has been measured by how much more deadly we can make our weapons. This is profound ignorance. The three poisons: greed, hostility, and ignorance. And we see it on display, and we embody it at times ourselves, especially when we get caught in our opinions of right and wrong. So how does Zen practice bring an end to grief and lamentation for the world? And it's hard to imagine having nothing but grief and lamentation for the world. We all feel it, all that suffering, every moment. And, sometimes if you wake in the middle of the night, do loving kindness practice for whoever needs it in the world at that time. All we have at this time is our minds and our hearts. And we can very intentionally send protection and care. So this practice can help us embody a balancing state of mind. And perhaps it's the most important thing we can do. to allow ourselves to feel our grief and our outrage and our worry in honor of those who are subjected to intolerable conditions at the moment. And we could also hold a larger view that embraces the conflicts of the Buddha's time as well as these conflicts as the human condition, and know that this is what is meant by samsara, a world that is limited to greed, anger, and ignorance. And our capacity has not yet discovered our capacity for moving beyond those as our motivating energies. As long as these conditions are held in our hearts, we suffer and we cause suffering. So it's so important for us to purify our own view. And that's where it's so important to understand what purifying is. It's so important to sit in silence and stillness and openness every day and reaffirm the wholeness of this life we're given. We practice reaching deeply beyond conditions into our heart minds, going beyond gate, gate, paragate, going beyond, always going beyond, into the essential heart where all combatants are one. The Israelis, the Palestinians, the Somalis, the many migrants that are fleeing starvation and death squads in Central and South America. We could say that for those of us who have the blessings of Dharma, the blessings of this moment in silence and being together with a clear and open heart, it's our responsibility to cultivate wide awareness, the awareness of this one heart that we share with all beings, and keep it warm and open. It's easy when we hear the news or read whatever sources you read to get really angry, fearful, righteous. And it's those times that we have an opportunity to really stay open, beyond our own fears and reactivity, and beyond automatically clinging to opinions about who's good and who's evil. We are at that time when we are able to do this, we embody the capacity, the human capacity, to hold all beings in our hearts and to keep this alive in part of the population, however small this population is. Keep it alive, even in the midst of the very darkest days. Earlier today, I was listening to some interviews with people who have recently had family members or children who have been killed. And they are the peace workers in Palestine and Israel. And they say the most important thing is to keep everyone in our hearts. And they've just lost. It's the worst kind of loss. And so I am inspired by that kind of dedication and commitment and vow. War breeds enmity and turns the wheels of delusion. And we turn the wheel of the Dharma, the wheel of compassion. I want to bring into this, we just did Sajiki, which is the ceremony where we feed the hungry ghosts, those beings who cannot take in the Dharma. So we give them candy. And while we're doing that, we are giving them the precepts. And we're chanting. And so I thought we could all chant together one of the lines, Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Do you have it so you can sing it anytime you want? Okay, one more time. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. And compassion in our tradition is not a sentiment. It is the willingness to see things as they are and to experience them as they are. So that's what we are continually willing to hold the entire world in our hearts. So in group Sanzen on Thursday, someone brought up his intention during that he's holding for an upcoming visit with his family, who are fundamentalist Christians, to share with them that he's no longer practicing that religion. And in our exploration, it's very clear, and he's very clear about the love that they all have for each other, and also how upset they'll be when he shares this with them. But because of the love he has, he wants to be real with them about who he is. Not wanting to cause them suffering conflicts with wanting them to know him as he truthfully is. So many of us, many of you, may have experienced and may be in the midst of experiencing this bind in various ways in your families, in our families. Competing needs, competing vows, competing views. And whenever we have competition, in the ways of competition, there's a winner and a loser. So this is another example of why it's important to hold the view that is bigger than that. This kind of situation challenges us in our practice. How to handle with skill actual conflict, real conflict. Wanting to live peaceably and also honestly sometimes brings a great deal of conflict forth. What do we do when we strongly disagree with someone's opinions or actions? How do we stay calm and patient and connected? So recently I was talking about opinions, holding opinions and holding them too tightly, and how this can be the ground for alienation and suffering. If we didn't believe our opinions, we wouldn't hold them. So that's not the solution. The solution is not to hold opinions. It's not to hold opinions, but rather to hold also a larger intention, which is to take care of our connection, to be able to tolerate conflict, tolerate it, not love it, but tolerate it. And when we tolerate something, we don't fly against it. We learn from it without cutting others out of our hearts. And this is a really tall order because we are animals. And as such, any kind of conflict triggers our brainstem, our fight or flight. You know this situation? I do. I mean, I still get caught all the time in that. So this requires us to cultivate a strong and constant vow to stay aware and continue to respect connection as our primary guide. Connection and truth, telling the truth. So here's another thing that we chanted. That is a beautiful practice. And so I'm going to sing it, and then please join in, and we'll sing it for a while so you can learn it. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. So we don't cut off our grief. We don't pretend that we aren't deeply troubled or fearful or worried about what's unfolding. We do dedicate every moment of our life to maintaining an open heart, to keep our capacity to care alive, to care, including about ourselves, our own well-being, and to respond rather than to react, to let our actions, what we do, how we be in the world, stimulate kindness and generosity and patience, perhaps in others. In a world that's so much at war, these qualities are to be carefully tended and kept alive. Beside anything else you might find to do in response, there are actions that can be taken at times. But for those who have the blessings of Dharma, it's our responsibility to abide in awareness of this one heart that we share with all beings at every moment, and keep it warm and open, beyond our own fears and reactivity, and beyond our opinions, to hold all sentient beings in our hearts. We keep this alive for the sake of all beings, even in the midst of the darkest times, especially in the midst of the darkest times. So may we all continue to practice together, take refuge in each other's company, and hold steady as a wholehearted, intelligent, responsive human being. Take care.
Page 5.